Welcome to Season 2 of the Cryptopulse podcast, your ultimate guide to the world of crypto, Bitcoin, and world economics. We're here to guide you through the crypto universe with thought-provoking topics, in-depth knowledge, and information to help you make informed decisions. We'll also be interviewing some of the best minds in the industry, such as CEOs of crypto projects, traders, economists, authors, and development teams from around the globe. And now for the episode.
Hi Garvit, welcome to the Cryptopulse podcast. How are you today?
I'm really good, Kevin. Really excited to be on the show.
Excellent. We're really excited to have you. You're one of a few of the Kadena eco projects that we've had come on the show to talk about what they're building. So before we go into Electron Labs, maybe you could do a quick introduction about yourself and your background and how you got involved in the crypto sphere in the first place.
Yes, absolutely. So I am a chemical engineer by training, and I graduated from IIT Delhi in 2017. After graduation, I started a company called Fraction 0x, which is basically a real-world tokenization company, where we were basically trying to put real-world assets on top of blockchain and make them tradable against other cryptocurrencies. Spent some time after that in the deep tech domain, particularly around augmented reality and fintech applications. And eventually a year back, decided to get back into the crypto game, started Electron Labs, and yeah, here we are.
What happened to that previous business? Is that something that's still going? Because that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, this concept is like 10 years ahead of its time. At that time, if you remember the previous bull market in 2017-18, this is the time when you were trying to build that. And the whole security token regulation, if you remember at that time, that was really, really hard. And generally also the market was not really favorable to this concept. I believe we'll not see something like this even for the next 10 years.
Yeah, that is super early to be doing something like that. And I think that's one of the problems with entrepreneurship sometimes is that you can have an amazing idea, you can execute, but the timing can be wrong. And that's critical in something's success.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, that was my first company. And that's when we realized that timing is actually very important. And what people want today is more important than what they want 10 years from now.
Yeah, very, very true. Okay, so moving on from that then. So you started Electron Labs. Can you just describe what it is and some of the problems that you're trying to solve?
Absolutely. So at Electron Labs, our goal is to make sure that all the transactions, so we believe that all the transactions and applications of the future will live inside a ZK rollup. Right? Our goal is to use our technology, our infrastructure, and bring that to various dApps and blockchains in the ecosystem and help them build ZK-powered applications. We focus on primarily two use cases. The first one is horizontally scaling the transaction layer. And the second one is bringing the concept of on-chain privacy. Okay,
could you just, so you say ZK you mentioned, yeah?
Yes.
Could you just explain what that is to some of our listeners? Because I've heard of this, and we actually spoke about this a few years ago on the podcast, actually, because there was a project that we interviewed that was using this. So what is ZK and how does it help with privacy?
Absolutely. So the way you should think about ZK technology is it's basically a new kind of a cryptographic construct. You have several, if you talk about the cryptography ecosystem, you have various hashing schemes, symmetric encryption, asymmetric encryption, all sorts of stuff. So you should think of this as a new kind of a cryptographic structure that has certain magical properties. The two magical properties which actually enable all these use cases to exist are, first, that if you're performing certain computation using zero-knowledge proofs, the inputs to those computations don't actually have to be made public, and you can still actually prove to someone that you perform certain computations without actually revealing the input to those computations. So that's where the privacy property basically comes from and the privacy use cases come from. The second property is that when you're constructing a proof of certain computations, somebody who's verifying this proof actually has to spend very little resources compared to the person who was actually trying to generate the proof in the first place. So it's like computational compression, so to speak, where somebody can generate the proofs of certain computation, or let's say transaction validity. So you could prove, let's say, a certain transaction was valid, and you could generate this proof on an off-chain computer on cloud, which is much more powerful. and then just only verify these proofs on chain, which are really, really cheap to do. So in a blockchain environment, it's essentially computational compression, or as we like to call it, scalability.
This technology has been around for a little while, right?
Yeah, I mean, the concept of ZK is quite old. I think it's 40 years old if you talk about the first research paper. But I think before the blockchain era, nobody actually found use cases for these tech. And I think Zcash guys were the first ones to actually come up with a real world use case for this technology.
Yeah. Because there was another privacy coin that was a fork of Bitcoin that we interviewed a few years ago, and they were using it. Yeah, you remember now, Ben? They were using ZK. Yeah, so that's interesting.
So Garvit, I'd like to ask just a question, because I know that you have recently gone through the first Kadena cohort, and one of the things we like to ask people that are sort of working with them is what is it in particular that drew you to build with Kadena?
Yeah, sure. So I think there are two reasons why we decided to partner with Kadena. So I think one of the first reasons is the Kadena's fundamental architecture is horizontally scalable. As more transactions come in, they can continue to add more chains which are interweaved together. And this is actually quite powerful, because we've all seen with Ethereum, and this is something we'll see with other chains also as they become larger, that all these blockchains have their throughput. They ultimately have an upper limit on their throughput. No matter how high that is, they already have an upper limit. And that's why as you scale to 1 billion users for this space, you will run into problems for scalability. That's where I think Kadena's base layer is quite exciting, because it can continue to scale as more users come in. That's one of the key reasons. I think the second reason we decided to partner up is because of the core team's strong focus on ZK technology. We are actually working directly with William and the core team, and they have a very clear roadmap ahead of them to bring this technology to bring ZK technology to Kadena ecosystem.
And how's your experience been in using the technology? One of the things that we hear is it's really early days, which is super exciting, and obviously, you get to sort of be a pioneer in building with this technology. But what's been your experience of physically using the Kadena coding?
Sure, absolutely. So I think Kadena's infrastructure is based on Rust. So that's something we have been using internally. So it wasn't too hard to actually start working with with Pact and everything. Having said that, I think a deep integration with Pact is something that's a bit into the future for our roadmap. And I think that is where things get very interesting, when we actually try and start building a Pact-based SDK for ZK technologies. I think that's where we'll actually see some of the deep stuff and deep integration happen between our technology and Kadena.
Yeah, that's great. And I just want to talk to you as well about privacy, because this is something that we talk about a lot in the blockchain space. And one of the things that our listeners always ask is why is privacy so important? We currently live in a sort of a Web 2 world where our data is moved around all of the time, and we sort of tend to trust these third-party applications and platforms with our information, and typically it goes quite well, but we know that it doesn't always. What is it about privacy that is so important for the future of the internet, and specifically Web3 and decentralized applications?
So the problem with blockchains is actually like in case of Web 2, right? Yes, your data gets moved around in certain ways, and it's a problem. But still, it's under the control of a single entity. It's not like your financial data or your, let's say, messaging history is open to everyone. That's not the case. It's on a single server, which is not accessible to anyone. But in the case of Web3, the problem is actually much bigger. Every single data point about every single user is completely public to everyone, because it's being recorded on top of a chain. The problem that comes with it is that the number of use cases that you can build on such a layer where everything is public becomes severely limited. For example, you will not want everyone to see your entire financial history, let's say the health insurance you've bought, the investments you've made. And if you were to use a blockchain-based bank account, that's exactly what would happen. If you make a Paytm payment to a friend, or let's say a Venmo payment to your friend, they're going to know your address and your entire financial history, right? So that's obviously when it comes to blockchains, the concept of privacy becomes even more important, Otherwise, a large number of use cases just cannot get built on top of blockchains.
Yeah, it's a great answer. It's sort of one of the blessings and the curse around blockchain, right? Is that you have this immutable data, but equally it's transparent and it's visible to everyone. Which sectors are you guys specifically looking to build for? I mean, you mentioned the financial sector, but I noticed on your website you talk about gaming and DeFi and loads of other different things. I mean, what is it that you guys are integrating with primarily?
I think it's quite early days right now to comment which sector will pick up first. It could potentially be gaming because as we were having these chats with gaming companies, we are realizing that there are certain kind of games that just cannot be built. Like imagine, have you played that game Battleship?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right. So you can't build Battleship on chain today unless you have privacy because you have to hide the position of your ships. Right?
That's a very good point.
I love that. Yeah. That's such a simple but brilliant example.
Yeah, this applies to a large number of other use cases also. Like, if you talk about more strategy games, for example, if you've played Risk, it's another board game that was popular. Again, you want to hide the position of the troops that you have. So a large number of use cases in terms of gaming, we could see that there are a large number of games that you just cannot build unless you have privacy. You have to enable this as a feature. So think of it this way. As a game builder, you're getting this additional feature that you can now use to come up with interesting game economics and interesting game design, right? So that's why we're actually excited about gaming as a sector. And we're already having these chats with some companies to figure that part out. Having said that, I think the use cases extend beyond that. If you talk about finance in general, I mean, we already discussed this, right? You don't want to have your financial history exposed to everyone. And
ideally not, yeah.
Right. Right. And in fact, even beyond that, if you talk about, let's say, trading on DeFi right now today, MEV is a major problem. And that happens because all your trades are public before they get executed, right? You can actually solve that problem with this technology. And yeah, I mean, the use cases, extend just, wherever we see, they basically, like, think of it this way. Most applications in the Web2 domain, they have some sort of privacy feature built in. Right? So if we make a comparison, if 99% of the use cases in the Web2 domain have a privacy feature requirement, then you will need that for Web3 products also.
We were looking at your roadmap earlier, and you've got lots of really interesting, exciting things coming up, ranging from creating a Helios bridge from the NEAR protocol to the Cosmos network to actually rolling out private P2P transactions. But what are you working on now? Where are you in terms of like the project and what's next, and what are the things that excite you the most?
So I think at this point, we are very close to, internally, we have already shipped some of our first products. And at the current moment, we're actually onboarding of some of our first customers for this technology, Kadena being one of them. So I think primarily we have 3 products. And the fourth one being the bridge. So for the first product, we have Electron SDK, which is basically a general purpose toolkit that enables developers to build ZK-powered applications, right? So you don't have to do any cryptography or any crazy mathematics in order to build these products. You can get started today without having to actually go down deep into this technology. That's the first product. And that's actually what our partnership with Kadena is also all about. On the second product, we are essentially launching you can call it as a new way to launch a token, which is basically, if you launch a token using that Electron P2P product, your token is going to be private, right? Whatever transactions you make using this token, and you can actually wrap your own token into this kind of a product. So once you wrap your token using our SDK, you will get a token that is completely private. You can send that token to someone, make payments, and nothing would be revealed. And then obviously you can eventually, during this process, you can trade this on existing dApps, DEXs, etc. This is interoperable with all the existing Web3 infrastructure on top of blockchains. And once you're done with your transactions, you can always unwrap your token and get back to the native form of that token. As a third product, we're actually working, this is a bit of a work in progress, which is where we're trying to scale certain dApps on top of proof of work chains, while making sure that they don't have to redeploy to some layer 2, right? In Ethereum, we've seen the problem is that if you want to achieve scalability, you have to deploy to some other rollup or some other L2. This is a problem of liquidity fragmentation and the user base also getting split across these networks. So we are trying to come up with this product where can we scale the technology or the DApp while staying deployed wherever they are right now. So this, in fact, hopefully we'll be working on this with Kadena also as part of our roadmap going forward.
And how are you tackling this roadmap? Because you guys are trying to do a lot, and it sounds like an ambitious plan. Are you taking this chunk by chunk? Are you building all of these in parallel? Do you have a team of developers? What's the setup? Because this sounds like a mammoth task.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely a mammoth task. But one of the cool things about ZK is it's really hard to learn in the beginning. But once you have learned it, the same technology pretty much applies to all these use cases. You will be surprised to know that the technology for all these three products is actually quite similar. And we don't have to change a lot as we start shipping new products. That's the crazy thing about ZK Tech. It's really hard to learn in the first place, but once you've learned it, you can ship products really, really fast.
What's going to be your route to market? How are you going to get people aware of this and using this? What's the plan there?
So I think that's where the challenge for the entire ZK ecosystem lies. Nobody really understands this, and we have to do a lot of work of educating people on this. Luckily, at least for Electron SDK, we are already seeing a lot of inbound interest for this technology. We're already integrating this with a couple of L1s, Kadena included amongst them. Near is another blockchain. They have this bridge called Rainbow, where we are integrating our technology with them. And we are already starting to see a lot of inbound interest in order to understand and build these use cases. Some of the coolest things we have seen is people actually reach out to us to discuss use cases that they can build using this technology. And most of these conversations we are having with people in the market are actually resulting in certain use cases being found and active development actually started. We're already working with the 5 to 6 different projects, I would rather say, that are actually using our technology to develop products. So I would say that this is a quite early stage for the ZK space in general, but I would definitely say that things are picking up pace.
Okay, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of level of adoption there is. So I have a question. This is a question from me. It wasn't a pre-planned one, but it's something that I've started asking a lot of Web3 blockchain crypto founders is like, what's your business model? Like, how does your business make money, and what's kind of like the end game really, from, because you're an entrepreneur, so I need to ask you an entrepreneurial question. So what would you say to that?
Absolutely. So I think the long run goal for at least for us, and I think most crypto projects, is to earn revenue off the transaction fees. In our particular model, we do plan to charge people for the privacy that we're offering. This will be a premium on top of the existing transaction fees, but it's still going to be quite cheap. We believe that if a large number of transactions start happening through the network, this is going to be a tremendous amount of revenue. I think in the short run, what we're trying to do is, since the demand to understand ZK technology is so high, we are actually providing infrastructure as a service where we kind of provide API endpoints, which basically power certain ZK applications. And for these API endpoints, we are actually charging a subscription model, and that seems to be working so far.
Gotcha. Okay, that seems very sensible. Because we speak to some founders in this space, and they're like, we're not sure. We'll probably make some money further down the line, but we need to build the product first and get it out there. And I always get really worried about that, because I think unless you've got a solid revenue model, your runway is not going to be very long unless you've got an awful lot of money or very understanding investors. So.
Or you have to launch a token.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You have to create some liquidity that way. Yeah, that's another option, of course. Let's just sort of move on to what you aim to have done by the end of the year. I mean, what are your primary goals for the end of 2022? Where do you want to be? So
I think the goal would be to power at least 20 different applications using our ZK infra. I think the goal, as I said, for the next 6 months is to find those early adopters and those early first 25 use cases that absolutely need this technology and cannot exist without it. Once we have that and we have revenue coming in, I think we can reinvest that to basically grow the DApp base, so to speak, and the user base for these DApps. I think that's the goal for the next 6 months.
I think that's a really sensible goal. I think, as you say, what you guys are offering is essentially privacy with your SDK as a service, and it's incredibly valuable. I mean, you guys are doing a lot of the legwork here, and for projects that perhaps haven't got the understanding of the technology, that just want to take an off-the-shelf solution and bolt it into what they're already doing. I mean, it's incredibly valuable. I suppose when you're looking for partners in this space, you're probably looking for a range of use cases, right? I mean, you want to cover across gaming. You want to be in DeFi, and you want to show how valuable this can be for anybody building any type of decentralized application.
Yes, precisely. I mean, at this point, I think the most exciting use cases for this technology, especially on privacy, are some of those use cases I think we haven't even thought about them yet. It's very similar to blockchains, right? Yeah. People came up with these use cases and had no idea they could exist. And I think we'll see something very similar happen over here. We're already starting to see this in gaming, I must say. But I think even beyond that, we're starting to see some very interesting use cases. For example, improving the security of bridges or launching new kinds of token standards, as we discussed. I think we'll see some very interesting stuff come up in the very near future.
Yeah, I hear a lot of my entrepreneur friends refer to it as solutions in search of a problem, which I think they try to say is a bad thing. But actually, with all interesting and innovative technology, it tends to be that way, right? It's kind of like you're a creator, you've built this awesome little thing, and you're like, okay, it does this great, cool thing, and now we need to go and find out where we can use it. And that sounds like kind of where you guys are at, which is incredibly exciting.
People used to say this thing with blockchain also I remember in 2016 when we had this whole, for 6 months, all these banks were trying to work with Hyperledger to basically, adopt blockchain technology for banking. And we used to hear this stuff at that time. But I think we have found some pretty interesting use cases after that.
I completely agree. I think Fidelity went out and said that they had tried to find something useful for blockchain. They tried it in 100 different spaces and it was good for nothing. And actually, I think that's been very much disproven since. So I think it's like the early days of the internet. I remember when people used to mock email and they used to think that was completely useless. And, I don't know how we'd survive without it these days.
Absolutely agree with you on that.
People are really excited at the minute by crypto's potential for a multitude of different personal reasons. But what development or concept makes you most excited? So other than maybe some of the privacy stuff that you're working on, what do you think is going to help revolutionize the world?
So I think the reason I got pulled into the space, this was back in college. I was reading this magazine called The Economist, and I was really starting to get excited about finance at that time. I eventually stopped reading that magazine, but there was this article about Bitcoin which introduced me to the blockchain technology. And when I read about it, the idea of self-sovereign money, I think, is really, really exciting. And at that time, I was actually still in college and I had no idea what personal finance or business finance is. Since then, I've learned a lot about these things. And the idea of self-sovereign money has become even more exciting for me since then. On a personal finance and even on a company's finance basis, I think it has become really interesting. And that's what I think keeps me going, the value that we see. I mean, as a crypto company, we do most of our transactions in crypto. And it's much easier, it's much smoother, and honestly, it's just better to deal in crypto for revenue and costs as opposed to your traditional banking infrastructure. And I think advancing that, using our technology is what keeps us going.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, for international commerce and for the kind of blend now between the digital commerce and physical commerce, there's nothing better than cryptocurrency. And we say this all the time. We're really only scratching the surface of what Bitcoin can do to unlock global commerce. And it's really exciting to see that sort of revolution happen before our eyes. And I struggle sometimes that people still need convincing. I have conversations with friends in group settings and they still don't understand what this thing is capable of. Frustrating.
I mean, for international payments for any of our businesses, we nearly always use crypto. It's brilliant, and it's just like a go-to thing. And most companies we deal with are happy to pay in crypto. So even for those transactions, we think it's great. What's your view on what's happening in India at the moment with crypto regulations? Because we read and hear things in the UK about some of the things that the government are doing, but it seems in contrast to the technical ability and the young population in India. So you've got this huge rise of entrepreneurs, technicians, developers, some amazing skill and talent. But then you seem to have a government that isn't very forward thinking. So what's your view on that?
So I think, honestly, I think you would be surprised to know, but I think the media is a bit is to blame a bit over here. I think first of all, some of the concerns I think being shown in the news I think are a bit overblown. It's not as bad. We are sitting in India and doing crypto business quite easily. Having said that, in a large and a complex country like India, I think it's quite hard to keep the bad actors out. And over here, I think the right way forward for regulations is over regulations. Otherwise, things can get a bit out of hand quite easily. So I wouldn't blame the government here. I think in order to keep the system running, you kind of have to make sure that only the absolutely stuff that is completely figured out is allowed to run, and all the experimentation has to happen outside and maybe then come in eventually.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, we talk about regulation a lot on the show, and actually regulators globally are handling this, in my opinion, quite horribly. And innovation is happening so fast that they're struggling to keep up. So I don't think India is any exception to the rule. I mean, the US are struggling, and so is the UK. I wanted to ask you a question, Garvit, about just your sort of experience as an entrepreneur in this space, because we get a lot of people listen to the show that are perhaps just starting out in their business journey, perhaps thinking about founding a Web3 business or working with blockchain. What kind of advice would you give to those people about just getting started?
Sure. So I think when we started as a company, I think one of the first two things that we focused on, that we wanted to build our presence or a brand as a team in the market, was that we are really good at tech. And the second thing we wanted to build on was that we're not looking to pull off any scam or anything. We are actually in here for the long run and establish our image around that in the market. So I think we have done that successfully over the past 6-7 months. I think whenever we go out to do business with people, I don't think so anyone questions us on that front. And I think establishing that as a personal brand and as a company's brand is really important for entrepreneurs in this space. It's quite easy to basically, lose yourself in the entire stuff that's happening on Twitter and everywhere. And it becomes even more important in a market that we're in right now. So I would really, request everyone to kind of focus on the first principles, focus on the fundamentals, and just build on from there.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I would also say as well, a lot of the businesses now that are happening in the Web3 world are anonymous. There are no faces for founders. And it's important that interviews like this are happening because, I think where credibility is so important, it's important to just be able to hear from the founder's mouth that this is what we're doing and this is how we're going to change the game. So yeah, we kind of appreciate you coming on and giving us your perspective.
So just to wrap things up, is there anybody that you look up to or anybody that you're particularly inspired by in this space?
Yeah, I have seen too much of the world to be following people anymore. I just go on and do stuff, man. I think we've seen too many people, become these sort of trendsetters, and then eventually everything turns out wrong. So I have stopped. Right. I just do whatever I feel necessary, man. Yeah.
Head down and building and creating business and creating a product that people want. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great attitude. I think you've got to have laser focus whenever you're building anything. I think there's a lot of noise out there, right? And things that can become a distraction. I think crypto, for some reason, has got this kind of this sort of messiah complex where we tend to sort of praise these figureheads for being genius people when actually, they're just egomaniacs.
I think we have that not just in crypto but everywhere. I mean, there are all sorts of
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Yeah, I could name a few, but I won't today.
We'll do an episode on crypto narcissists.
I think we're thinking about the same person.
I think we probably are. Yeah, we definitely are.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Garvit. Honestly, we wish you all the best and every success in what you're doing. It's a really, I think the best thing about what you're building is the use case is so broad. And I think the biggest challenge is the use case is so broad. So, would love to have you back further down the line to talk to you again about how things are going. But thanks so much for coming on the show and talking to us.
Thanks a lot for having me here. It was great chatting with you guys, and
You
looking
too.
forward to chatting again in the near future.
Thanks very much.
Cheers now.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. It would mean the world to us if you could leave a review wherever you're listening. This really does help and allows other people to find us online. You can keep up to date with new releases of the podcast by subscribing and following us on Twitter or Instagram for the latest crypto-related news. Information provided by Cryptopulse via this podcast, website, social media channels, and any other medium does not constitute financial advice, investment recommendations, or any other type of advice whatsoever. The Cryptopulse team are not professional financial advisors. Trading and purchasing cryptocurrencies do carry risks, and anybody wishing to partake in such activities should seek professional advice.